And the first accuser was then wiped off the face of the earth. And then any accuser after that, they get the message, which makes me think that this guy must have done some serious shit. If the first person, and this may not be the first, but the first person to openly accuse him on Facebook is gone. And if you were even thinking about accusing this guy of something, of Zhang, whatever his name is, if you were even thinking of accusing him of something, you are no longer doing that. What's up, guys? Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. Before we start, this is a quick announcement to let you guys know that I'm dropping bonus episodes on AUXORO Premium. For less than $5 per month when you sign up for the year, you get a 2-hour bonus episode every month of my show, The Aux, that covers exciting and sometimes twisted topics like MKUltra, the COVID lab leak hypothesis, Tim Dillon, Tom Cruise, the Tuskegee experiment, the obesity epidemic, and more. You also get monthly solo episodes with my takes on drugs, sex, money, creativity, mindfulness, and you have the ability to submit topic suggestions for both of my shows, The Aux and the AUXORO podcast. Expect 3 hours of new exclusive podcast content per month, including access to all archived episodes found nowhere else but AUXORO Premium. Visit auxoro.supercast.com to sign up today. This is the best deal in podcasting. 3 hours of exclusive podcast content to punch you in the motherfucking mouth every month for less than $5. No half-assed episodes here. Go to auxoro.supercast.com to join the premium gang today. What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Aux, and I hope everyone is doing well today. I'm excited for this episode. We got a lot of things to get into. We are talking about a Chinese tennis player that was possibly snatched by the vice premier of China. We talk about drugs and overdose. We're talking about a history teacher that got thrown out of her class for going on a rant about Trump. And we're talking about the Joe Rogan SNL sketch, what I thought was tragically unfunny, the SNL sketch that involved Joe Rogan. But before we get into that, I got my butt kicked a little bit. I don't know why I said butt. I never censor myself from cursing at all. What the heck? I've never censored myself before in my life. What the heck are these fools talking about? I got my ass kicked a little bit in Muay Thai yesterday, and we did some sparring. And if you go a long time without sparring, if you do drills only in Muay Thai, if you're punching pads, you're punching the bag, you start to think that you're a lot better than you are because you're not going against anyone else. And I realize that that's what I love about having podcast conversations, is that I'm going toe to toe. It's not a competition, but I'm with someone else trying to build this thing, this conversation, this magical entity of two voices in real time that will want someone to tune in and stay tuned in. And I love that back and forth, that sparring, that conversational sparring. And these solo episodes are more like drills. They're more like techniques. It's working on the skills that help you become a good podcast conversationalist, but no one's pushing back against me. No one's calling a fucking idiot. People DM me and call me a fucking idiot, but if you're listening to this right now, there's no recourse for you to tell me that I'm wrong in real time or to tell me that you agree or disagree, which is fun. I mean, it's also fun to go on rants. It's also fun to talk like this solo, but you really don't know how good you are unless you're making shit with other people, unless you're getting some pushback, you're getting feedback, and whatever it is, Muay Thai, podcasting, getting your ass kicked in the courtroom, wherever you happen to work and make that cash, you find out how good you are, and you have a much better idea of how good you are when you're going against or going with other people. So that was my kick to the ego this week, is sparring in Muay Thai and finding out that, I'm not as good as I thought the past few weeks. And I learned that lesson through getting popped in the face a few times before I started to put my hands up. So without further interruption, let's dive deep into this week's topics. Speaking of abuse and Muay Thai, there is an article on a Chinese tennis player vanishing from the scene. She vanishes completely after accusing someone very high up in China, very high up in the political sphere, of sexual abuse. So the title of the article, this is on sportbible.com by Ryan Seidel, S-I-D-L-E. The title of the article is a Chinese tennis player vanishes after accusing former vice premier of sexual abuse. And hopefully I won't vanish after going through this article. So it reads, a Chinese tennis player has reportedly gone missing and had her social media posts deleted after accusing Beijing's former vice premier of sexual abuse. Peng Shuai posted accusations that she was abused by Zhang Gaoli, Z-H-A-N-G, Gaoli, G-A-O-L-I, last week on Chinese social media site Weibo, known as the Chinese Facebook. The post, which claimed that Zhang had forced the 35-year-old into sex, was deleted soon after, and reportedly the word Wang Q, which is tennis in Chinese, was even censored on the site for some time after. So this woman, Peng Shuai, who competed just as recently as 2020 in the Australian Open, she is, no one knows where she is right now. She made a post saying that she was abused by Zhang Gaoli, the vice premier, Beijing's former vice premier, and she was possibly snatched off the face of the earth. This makes me think about how good we have it in the U.S. People complain a lot about not being able to speak your mind in the U.S., having your speech censored, not being able to share your opinions boldly and brightly, no matter how smart or stupid or fucking uninformed those opinions may be. A lot of people complain about not being able to share their opinions in the U.S. But one thing we don't have to worry about in the United States is tweeting someone or tweeting something against the president and then having someone from the Secret Service show up at your door and violently murder you in front of your family. And I'm not saying that's what happened to Peng Shui. I hope to God it's not Peng Shui. But that is a great freedom that we have in the United States that gets lost on me as a podcaster. Sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I forget if I lived in other countries, I would have to be much more worried about my personal safety as a podcaster, as someone who throws out content into the ether. And they're much bigger podcasters than me. I'm a small, mid-tier podcast, and so it's not like I'm getting massive amounts of attention compared to, Call Her Daddy, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, other guys and gals out there that get millions of downloads per episode. But still, there's a great freedom that we enjoy in the U.S. and as a content creator specifically, where I can record something calling Trump an idiot or calling Obama an idiot, calling Biden a piece of shit, disagreeing openly with our political leaders. And as long as I'm not making threats against their life, as long as I'm not calling for violence or saying we should cause physical harm to a political leader, no one's going to come to my door, and at least not right now. I mean, in Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, anything is possible, but at least right now, no one's going to show up at my apartment, put a black bag over my head, and then drive me off to some black site and beat the fuck out of me until I take down a post. And people forget that if you're in China, shit like this happens. That it is a country that is communist and controls all of social media. They control the narrative. They control what information gets leaked about COVID. any disease, any political happening. China is a communist propaganda machine, and if you choose to go against that machine, you will get brought to your knees digitally and physically and forced to suck that short, pale Chinese cock, that Chinese communist cock. And I say that as someone with a very average sized penis, and I know that that is a great misrepresentation of all Chinese phalluses. I'm sure there's some large and some small and everything in between, but what came to mind in that moment, what came to my mind in that moment is that Chinese have a small dick stereotype, and I'd like to think that whoever snatched Peng Shuai has a very small dick indeed, because they're a very bad person and they don't deserve to have a large cock. I like to think that it's some of the greatest men in the world that are afforded that ability. That would be great if your dick size was determined based on how good or bad of a person you were. Soup kitchens would be flooding with guys in their 20s, just fresh out of college. Guys that are going guys that are going out on a Thursday night. Soup kitchens would be packed to the gills with volunteers at around 7 to 8 p.m. You know, before that first drink and line of Coke, you would get right into the soup kitchen and you would serve as many homeless people as possible, if that would add even a half an inch to your cock for that Thursday night, if you're in hopes of getting lucky. The world would be a much better place if cock size was associated with the size of your heart. If you could do good deeds and give that good dick, there would be the world would be a much better place, would be a much kinder place if you knew that if you did something out of a bad intention to someone, it would not only affect your interactions emotionally and verbally, but it would affect your physical interactions as well. It would be like it would make you think so much more drastically before you did anything. If you could be penalized through the form of losing inches to your cock, or getting a bigger vagina for gals, because I know that's something that girls hate, is, you know, having a big fat pussy. So it would add an inch of diameter to your pussy, or take away an inch of length to your cock if you did something bad. And in this case, you know, Zhang Li should lose almost all of his cock if he snatched up Peng Shuai. So let's go into this. Zhang Li, who is now 75 years old, who was a high-ranking member of the Communist Party, was accused of having an affair with the 2014 French Open doubles champion in 2011. So there's a past history here. There's a past history between Zhang and Peng Shuai. Peng then claimed that he rekindled things in 2018 after inviting her over for dinner and then pressured her into having sex, which she refused before eventually relenting. According to the Daily Mail, the former number one doubles player has not been seen since the accusations, and that the deleted post isn't the only thing to happen to her profile. The post was gone from Weibo, which is said to have been heavily monitored by the Chinese government, after just 20 minutes, and the rest of her profile soon followed. That is fucking horrifying, to think that you can post something on Facebook in China, and knowing that the government is keeping a close watch on you, and your life could be directly affected by the government taking action against you because of a social media post. And I have no, naivete about the government not watching Facebook posts. I think with everything that's come out through Edward Snowden and the surveillance technology that our secret agencies have in the U.S. I think they are employing everything to the fullest to monitor Gmail. When I send emails, I assume those may be read. Even on Google Documents, when I write shit on Google, I assume those documents can be read and are being read and scanned. Phone calls, browser history, tapping into the camera on your computer. I just assume that everything is being watched. But the one thing that doesn't enter my mind is that someone's going to come and take me away because of something that I posted on Facebook. And again, I could understand if I'm threatening someone directly or I'm calling for harm against a certain group. If I am trying to influence physical violence against someone, sure, come get me. I'm a piece of shit and I deserve to be roughed up a little bit. But to post an accusation, like this is something akin to what a woman would have posted about the Me Too movement, maybe against some guy like Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood. If someone came out against Harvey Weinstein, and hundreds of women did, and they did it through tweets, a lot of them. Imagine if someone tweeted against Harvey Weinstein, the first person, whoever it was, you just never heard from them again. That's kind of what I think this is like. Like if someone came out against someone big like Harvey Weinstein or like a Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and the first accuser was then wiped off the face of the earth, and then any accuser after that, they get the message, which makes me think that this guy must have done some serious shit if the first person, and this may not be the first, but the first person to openly accuse him on Facebook is gone. And if you were even thinking about accusing this guy of something, of Zhang, whatever his name is, if you were even thinking of accusing him of something, you are no longer doing that. If the consequence of you coming out with a sexual assault allegation is that your family never sees you again and you never get to do anything again, you never get to eat ice cream or watch The Good Place or bike ride through Central Park, you never get to, go snowboarding, you never get to do a kettlebell swing with a 30-pound kettlebell, you never get to do a single-arm kettlebell swing, you never get to, roll out, and I'm saying this because I'm looking at my gym right now, thinking about all the things that I could never do physically if someone came and snatched me up right now and make a podcast. I could never use my foam roller to roll out my left butt cheek, which has been bothering me lately, and it hurts so good. It hurts when I'm rolling over my butt cheek, and then about 30 seconds in, I start to ask for more and more pain because that myofascial release mechanism is so powerful for recovery. I couldn't imagine not being able to roll out my left ass cheek because I refuse to censor my language. My left ass cheek. I refuse to believe that I could no longer do that if someone snatched me up. But the reality is that someone could at anywhere, at any time, if I was in China, releasing podcasts, just wild podcasts, throwing shit against the wall and just see what works. And that's a lot of times that's what I do with the aux, is that I'm not necessarily trying to be right for everything, because you can't be. But what I want people to do is listen and be engaged and hopefully learn something, and me hopefully learn something too as I'm going through articles. I feel like that's an exciting and interesting way to go through stuff, is read it for the first time and see what pops into your head in real time. And you can't do that if you live in a country like China where you get penalized for, saying that Zhang didn't wipe his ass. Not even accusing him of sexual assault, but just saying like, I was in the bathroom with Zhang yesterday and he was shitting his brains out and I didn't hear the toilet paper. He didn't wipe his ass. He came out, barely washed his hands, and then he walked out of the bathroom. If you accuse Zhang of being a somewhat dirty guy who didn't wipe his ass, you might also be gone. it's scary to imagine living in a place where you can't say anything. And that makes me think, how bad is China right now? What is it actually like to live in China as a Chinese citizen? Because how can you possibly know what it's like unless you live there yourself? Which I haven't. I would like to explore China at some point. But how can you possibly know what it's like to live in China as a Chinese citizen under this communist regime, because the narrative is so tightly controlled by social media and the lack of social media? If you're not allowed to speak the truth, if you're not allowed to say what's on your mind and say controversial things and disturbing things and share your opinions strongly and boldly and unfiltered, how the fuck do you know what it's like in China? And that is the number one way that you control someone, is not to censor their stuff. It's to instill the fear of censorship, because that stops it from being shared in the first place. This is what's probably going on. You know, I don't know what happened to Peng Shuai. She might be, maybe they're keeping her in a hotel room or something. They're not, because she's good for China's image. She is a professional tennis player. She brings in viewership and money to Chinese sports, so they probably don't want to hurt her. But she may be being kept in the fucking Beijing Four Seasons. I don't know. But to other people in China that don't have her status and don't have her celebrity, the message has been sent that if you have any sexual assault allegations, especially someone high up in the Chinese Communist Party, you will suffer real-world physical consequences. And again, I don't know what those consequences are, but that is the number one way that you censor people, is to instill fear before they even write that tweet, before they share that Facebook post, is to have examples of people suffering consequences right in front of you on Twitter. And then that keeps you from wanting to share anything, because you have a family, you have a job. People care about their primal through lines, their primal pillars. People will do anything to protect their primal pillars. They want to eat, they want to sleep, they want to fuck, they want to make money and continue living. And you want to eat, sleep, fuck, make money, so you can do the things that you want to do. And if you have something that takes those away, 99.9% of people are not going to share that post or tweet that thing about a leader in the country if those primal pillars will be sabotaged or sacrificed. And I don't blame those people, by the way. It's I blame Zhang, but I don't blame the people who are scared to speak out or fearful to speak out, because you don't know what the fuck is going to happen to you. And I am in a lucky situation recording this from the United States, where that is truly is an afterthought to me, unless I'm reading about it, which is why I wanted to get into this. So her profile was taken down 20 minutes after the post. Her post was taken down. The English paper reports that let me get into this. So the Daily Mail shows her post, the now deleted image, which is all in Chinese. There's no translation, but I assume it's telling a story about how this guy Zhang abused her. The deleted post isn't the only thing to happen to her profile. The post was gone from Weibo, which is said to be heavily monitored by the Chinese government. Peng's profile was disabled at first, and she couldn't be found through a search, but it has since been found and does come up on Google search. So they even took away her profile from search, from Google search. Not from Google search, from just the search in general on Weibo. So Google search was intact. The English paper reports that all comments on our post have been disabled, and posting about either the accuser or the accused, even when not about the story, throws up the error. So you can't even post about the accuser or accused, about Peng Shuai, what's happening to her, or the accused, the person. And again, that chops off any momentum or any sort of movement at its head. Because when there is no data and there is no hard evidence yet, the thing that gets people to direct their attention to gathering hard evidence for something like a Harvey Weinstein situation is that there are hundreds and thousands of anecdotes that come out. Anecdotal evidence many times, the amalgamation of anecdotal evidence is not equal to physical evidence, but many times it is the precursor that incentivizes people to gather physical evidence. And when you aren't allowed to gather that anecdotal evidence in the form of tweets or Facebook posts, people coming together on social media, it's very hard to be motivated to gather physical evidence because people don't see it. It's not in front of their face. When the Me Too movement was first happening, and I would go on Twitter and everything was just about sexual assault. All these women telling stories about what happened to them some 20, 30 years ago, and just sharing these stories at first with no legal allegations in mind. I'm sure some of them had legal allegations, but it looked like a lot of these women just were inspired to share their story by coming across the stories of other women who are sharing similar things. And so when you cut off that empowerment tool on social media, when you cut off the power of seeing someone's story and seeing someone else's story similar to yours, it's impossible to make a movement. It's impossible to start a hashtag or whatever the fuck it is, because you can't even write about it. Not only can you not write about your accuser, but you can't even write about your accuser. You can't even insinuate something about your accuser. You can't even speak in code words, code names, whatever, because the government has taken that away from you. The player did admit she had no evidence of their prior affair. What is this? Is this the same article? The player did admit she had no evidence of their prior affair, so Shuai, Peng Shuai, or the sexual abuse she claims happens, but the politician wanted to keep the whole thing a secret. So no evidence of the prior affair, no evidence of sexual abuse. By the way, and this is an honest question. One of the big pushbacks that people have against rape cases is the lack of evidence that is gathered, or the lack of evidence that is even able to be gathered. Just the lack of evidence in rape cases. There are a lot of guys and men in particular, and I have thought about this as well, is you have a guy who is accused of rape, and he is exiled on social media with that accusation before the trial, before any evidence is presented. What is the evidence for rape? Because not all rapes are brutal in physical nature. There are a lot of times where the person being raped will give in and allow things to happen, even though it's against their consent. They will have the realization that if I fight back, this will make things worse than me, or worse for me. So there are people that are raped that come out of rapes with the appearance, the physical marks of consensual sex. There's, they don't have a black eye. There's no, there's no slashes. There's no violent marks on the private parts. And again, I'm just speculating. I'm in no way qualified to make any bold legal claims about rape. But I'm just thinking, how do you gain evidence? How do you make a good case against a rapist when a lot of the evidence may not be evidence in the way that we think of it? It's not physical evidence. It's this guy I went back with this guy, and maybe he held a knife to me, or maybe you thought it was consensual sex, or maybe you thought it was gonna be way different than it ended up. Maybe you're a girl in her early 20s and you're at a bar in New York City and you go back with a guy. You go back to a guy's apartment. You weren't planning on having sex, but you wanted to go back. And the guy was set on having sex, and that's what he thought was going to happen. And then he gets angry. You feel very unsafe. Maybe the guy insinuates that he's going to hurt you, do something to you, going to harm you in some way if he doesn't get what he wants. Maybe he even physically holds you down, but it's not in a way that would leave a lot of marks. Maybe he's, restricting you or constraining you. And he's smart about it, so he's not using ropes or anything, but maybe he's just kind of like holding you down and saying, if you struggle, this is going to be worse for you. And then you get raped and you don't fight back because you don't want it to be worse than it already is, and you want to get out of there alive. And then you have to go to the cops, say you were raped, and then the cops need to gather evidence in a case against this piece of shit guy. So what is the evidence? Is it... If it's not physical, how do you possibly indict someone for rape? Do you ask friends? Is there some sort of statistic where rape victims will tell someone early on or tell a friend? Do they go to friends and ask if you have had conversations with them? Do they look at the history of the guy? Like, in such a he says, she says thing, how does a girl who was raped and, not claiming rape, but was actually raped, how do you express that through evidence? That's something, again, like I've thought about the legal process of rape and of accusing someone of rape, and as someone who's not familiar with the legal process, I've wondered, like, how are these cases settled? Because we have the pop culture version of rape, which is that a guy holds a knife to your throat and maybe he ties you down and he punches you and beats the shit out of you. But rape is someone forcing you to have sex against your will. And a lot of times forcing someone to do something against their will doesn't leave physical marks, doesn't leave physical damage. So it's a tough thing. So there is no evidence of their prior affair. There's no evidence of the Peng, Shuai, and Zhangoli affair, or the sexual abuse that she claims. Politician wanted to keep the whole thing a secret. It is not known why she chose the timing of her recent post, but it did say, "You've said you are not afraid, but even as an egg hurled at a rock, a moth to a flame for self-destruction, I will speak the truth with you." She said, quote, "You've said you are not afraid, but even as an egg hurled at a rock, a moth to a flame for self-destruction, I will speak the truth to you." So it sounds like she's saying, even if I self-destruct for this, or even if someone else destroys me, if this leads to my own destruction, physically, mentally, emotionally, she's going to speak the truth. And that's a hell of a fucking statement right there. A spokesman for Beijing's foreign ministry was asked about the accusations earlier this month, but they refused to answer the questions. Not surprised at all. If you live in a communist country and you're a communist leader, why the fuck would you answer any questions when you control the media and you can just put out your own thing? Instead, they said, "I have not heard of it, and it is not a diplomatic question." Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if you go up to some guy and it's about the disappearance of a girl, and you just ask him some basic questions like, "Hey, where were you that night? Did you tell anyone where you were? We're trying to figure out what happened to this girl. If you have any information." And his answer is, "I have not heard of it, and it is not a diplomatic question. Thank you." If that's not the guiltiest shit I've ever heard in my life. If you use the word diplomatic in response to any accusation, you should automatically be deemed guilty. If someone asks you, "Did you steal the cookie from the cookie jar?" The 6-year-old asks her son, or if a mom asks her 6-year-old son, "Did you Frank, did you? And I don't know why the 6-year-old is named Frank. That name went out of style 4 decades ago. But let's just go with it. So if you're a mom and you ask your 6-year-old son, "Hey Frank, hey old wise Frank, you 6-year-old wise boy, did you steal the cookie from the cookie jar?" And Frank goes, "Mom, diplomatically, that's not a question. She should get rid of Frank right there because he is set to live a life of destruction. I would disown my kid on the spot if they ever answered a question using the word diplomatically. Same thing. It should be written into law right now. If you get accused of any crime and you use the word diplomatic, you're guilty. Life in prison. Give him the chair or her the chair. Where, gender equality. You should suffer to the fullest extent of the law." So this whole situation is fucked. And this is one of those stories where you don't know if more is going to come out about it, because it's just, even if she is a huge tennis star and a communist country wipes her off the face of the map, who's going to ask questions? How do you possibly investigate that? It would have to be someone Chinese doing it from the inside, because they're certainly not going to let someone from another country investigate this. So yeah, I won't be starting a Weibo account anytime soon. I barely use Facebook, but I will not be on Weibo. That's for sure. So, 34 minutes in. Let's go, baby. On to the next topic. A son dies of overdose. This is a Reddit post that I saw a few days ago that hit me pretty hard. And it is a mom asking about the overdose of her son. And this was posted on the Reddit called Drugs. Drugs is the name of the Reddit, r-drugs. And this is the post about a mom asking about her son dying of overdose. The mom says, "I have questions. My son died of an accidental overdose November 2020. I was wondering why he would take methamphetamine, amphetamine, fentanyl, and tramadol at the same time. Only he knows, of course, but I don't have to ask. Or only he knows, of course, but I don't have him to ask. I'm searching for the meaning of this. I'm devastated, and I can't help but wonder if this was on purpose or accidental. Does anyone have anything that could help me? I would appreciate it so much. Thank you." So right off the bat, methamphetamine, amphetamine. I've taken Adderall. I know Adderall is supposedly similar to meth. I don't know the amphetamine that was in his system, but it's an upper mixed with fentanyl and tramadol. Now, I'm just looking up what tramadol is. So tramadol is a pain medicine similar to an opioid, and it is classified as a synthetic opioid. And then there's also fentanyl in his system. I've never looked up I kind of know what fentanyl is. Fentanyl is also a powerful synthetic opioid similar to morphine, but is 50 to 100 times more potent. So fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than classic opioids like morphine. So you don't need a lot to kill someone else or kill yourself. And so this is complete speculation, but I would gather, based on my personal drug use and knowledge of the drug use of other people, is that this guy was taking the methamphetamine and amphetamine on purpose. So whether it was meth or some sort of ADHD medication like Adderall, Ritalin, and also was taking the tramadol on purpose to kind of maybe bring himself down off of the amphetamine, bring himself down off of the upper. He was probably taking the tramadol on purpose, and then the fentanyl was laced into the tramadol. So I would suspect that this kid did not know about the fentanyl maybe he bought the meth, whatever it was, Adderall, meth, and the tramadol. He bought those separately. And then the tramadol was laced with fentanyl. He took the tramadol either with the methamphetamine or trying to come down off the methamphetamine, and it was laced with fentanyl. The tramadol was laced with fentanyl, and he died. His heart stopped, passed away into sleep. And that's happened many times before. It's happened to music artists, actors. There's someone from every segment of society, it seems like, that's passing away from fentanyl every other week. And it's not only mixed in painkillers and downers, but it's also being mixed into uppers like cocaine. And I don't really understand that. I don't understand. I can see why a dealer trying to save money on selling painkillers and something like tramadol, I could see why a dealer would cut that with fentanyl. Again, it's stupid because it's 100 times more potent than morphine, but I could see why a dealer would cut that in because the fentanyl is cheap. You can mix in a small amount and it will make the person feel a synergistic effect with the other downer they're taking. And if they don't take enough to kill them, if they take enough for a good high, I imagine the fentanyl combination with the tramadol could be pleasant. But why would you mix that into cocaine? Fentanyl is being found more and more in cocaine, and those two drugs don't match effects with each other. Cocaine is an upper. You blow a line of cocaine, and you want to start 8 businesses before midnight, and you want to talk your face off. You think everything you say is brilliant, and then you continue to go in the bathroom and take more bumps throughout the night, rub that shit in your gums, and cocaine, it's a hell of a drug. I've enjoyed it. I have not enjoyed the lows of it, but I've enjoyed being on cocaine, and it doesn't make sense to me why fentanyl would be put in there other than some sort of other than a dealer having harmful intentions toward the people taking the drugs, which are his customers, which doesn't make sense. Why would a dealer purposely put something that's going to harm his customers? Why would a dealer put something that's not in his financial best interest into a drug to kill someone? That knowingly, if they take this amount, if they do a full gram and this amount of fentanyl is in there, if they blow that coke to the dome, they will die that night. Why would a dealer sabotage their own customer base? And this is a rumor that I've heard floating around online. It's that fentanyl is not... when you have overdoses of fentanyl, when you have people taking fentanyl mixed with other drugs like Xanax or cocaine, like Xanax may it kind of fits. They're both downers, both painkillers, both have painkiller-like effects, but cocaine, it doesn't fit at all. Why would you mix a downer with an upper with coke? That's not the desired effect. The desired effect of fentanyl is not similar to the desired effect of cocaine, whereas the desired effect of fentanyl is similar to other drugs like tramadol, morphine, Xanax. So this is a theory that I've heard floating around online, is that when you have fentanyl mixed with other drugs in copious amounts, where it's enough to kill you, that is not the doing of the dealer who's selling the drugs to their customer. It is actually warring cartels who are trying to sabotage the supply of other cartels. They will find a way to put in fentanyl to the drugs of other cartels, of other suppliers, and knowingly kill customers who buy that drug. So I'm sure that there are fentanyl accidental overdoses that happen, or dealers that are attempting to cut the drugs in ways that will enhance the effect. And still, that's fucked up, because fentanyl is such a powerful drug that you can't really just casually mixing fentanyl with something and eyeball that and then sell it to people and feel okay with that. So it's not like I agree with fentanyl being laced into drugs with good intentions because it's such a potent drug, but there is evidence and there are rumors floating around that suggest, or I want to say there's evidence because what I read was simply just a rumor. It was a post about the state of our current drug environment, but there are rumors and people talking about cartels using different tactics and more modern tactics of, instead of, going at each other and killing each other, they are finding ways to sabotage the supplies of their competition. And, commercially, this makes sense. If another supplier becomes known for killing their customers, you are naturally not going to buy from that supplier anymore. And there possibly are thousands of maybe even millions of people. I don't know how many people have died of incidental fentanyl intake, but it's definitely in the thousands, maybe the millions. I don't know, but why couldn't it be cartels? It makes sense. Cartels are not known to have the strongest morals. So it wouldn't surprise me if one cartel was sabotaging the supply of another cartel, and then that makes its way down. And it would honestly be the perfect thing because you don't need a lot of fentanyl to kill someone. You could sneak in a small amount to a big supply of drugs, and then that gets cut up unknowingly into smaller doses that are then cut down again and again, and it's dealt out to people. And so that bigger amount of fentanyl that you put in the beginning, that is enough to take out thousands of people, is now still present in the smaller amounts of drugs, and it's enough to still kill someone or give them a really fucking horrible experience, and even put them in the hospital if they don't die. And so hearing this story about this mom asking why her son took methamphetamine, fentanyl, tramadol, it makes me wonder why we haven't legalized harder drugs already, or we haven't provided a better path in the United States to legalize harder drugs. Because the war on drugs has been going on for decades. The government has not made any leeway. This isn't even a war anymore. The government has all of the resources on their side, and they can't fight a bunch of people who deal drugs. It's not a war. It's not even. Drugs are growing. The supply continues to grow. The demand continues to grow. The supplier is always going to be ahead of the government. The government's just playing defense, and the war on drugs has not worked. It's been, I don't know how many fucking years since we first declared a war on drugs, but it is safe to say that the dealers have won. I'm in Brooklyn right now, and if I really wanted to, I could probably get 20 different illegal drugs in my apartment within the next 3 hours. If I wanted to, I could call someone up or go on fucking Craigslist or some app that encodes your messages and look around for people dealing certain drugs, talking to someone. I could have that shit within the end of the day. So to say that there's a war on drugs is ridiculous. There's not a war on drugs. It's just a charade. And the only person that wins when you perpetuate this war on illegal drugs are the cartels, and the people who lose are the average person who doesn't know what they're getting. If you don't know what you're getting, you are at a very high risk of ingesting something incidentally that you did not intend to purchase. And this happens with things that are much more legal than drugs. There are toxic combinations or very bad combinations that people buy, that people can legally buy, that happen right now. Like all of these pre-workouts and like shit that I used to take all the time, all these supplements that are not FDA approved but are sold over the counter, and you can take this shit and people die of heart attacks, people have adverse reactions, and there are things that go on where there are ingredients inside these bottles and inside these powders that are not on the label. And so if that's happening in a legal operation, it's sure as shit happening in an illegal operation like producing cocaine or heroin. And if the government came in and we even approached the cartels and we even approached the people who were involved in the supply and said, hey, listen, people are obviously not going to stop buying drugs. It has been illegal for decades, and the supply or the demand of drugs has not gone down. People will continue to buy cocaine, heroin, weed, pills, whatever it is. The demand is not stopping. It is not slowing. So let's work together and create a product that is safest for the user. And if the government stepped in, like they have already started to do with weed, which is great, and you designate growers, you designate suppliers, like if there was something like that for cocaine in the United States and something like that for heroin in the United States, where you would have exact dosages, you would know the strength of it, you would have something, you would have a much better indication of what you're actually taking and how much you're taking, and someone could advise you, this is what you're looking, this is the strain you're looking for, this is what this will do to you, this is how much you should take. And I'm not suggesting this be sold over the counter. I think harder drugs like weed, it should have more protections than weed, but it would be great if you could walk into a store, get your ID checked, maybe background check. If you could walk into a store and buy cocaine, and just cocaine, not cocaine cut with fentanyl, not cocaine with rat poison in it, not cocaine with fucking God knows what, with peroxide cleaner. You're not blowing gasoline up your nose. But if you could buy if you could buy a gram of cocaine from a store, you would know what percentage it was, you know how strong it was. Someone from the store would walk you through the inherent risks of it. They would ask you health questions. Do you have a history of heart, heart problems in your family? Someone would have an honest conversation with you about cocaine, which millions of people in the United States already do, and they many times do not do it safely. And there's no way. Like, I've just been guessing the times that I've done cocaine. I've done cocaine on 10 to 12 separate occasions in my life. And I've literally just been hoping. I remember having a thought in my head, like, I hope this doesn't have fentanyl in it, and just blowing a line to my face. And then an hour later, I'm fine. And I'm like, all right, I guess this is good cocaine. Or at least it doesn't have something that's deadly in it. It's funny. I've been in groups of people before doing cocaine, and there's actually this one time, which is this is a very dark moment in my life. I was with a group of people doing cocaine. I was in Iceland, did not know anybody, went there by myself, and we were in a park, a group of 5 guys, 5 girls, going out in Reykjavik, and one of the guys brought out cocaine. And I was fucked up. I wanted to do cocaine. Hadn't done it in probably like a year and a half. And I didn't know what was in it. And I was kind of spooked at the time because I was starting to read these fentanyl articles. Maybe it was around the time Mac Miller died. But in my head, I remember thinking before that, I got to be careful. I'm not going to do coke anymore. I don't know what's in it. I don't want to fucking do a line and fucking pass the fuck out. And so what I did, I actually, at the park, because There apparently there are no cops in Reykjavik. I saw maybe 4 cops the entire time in Iceland. We were doing blow in the middle of a park in Reykjavik when it was still light out. It was light out for 23 hours a day when I was there in July. And I actually said, I'm good. I'm not going to do it. And so I waited for everyone else around me to do cocaine. And then about 30 minutes later, when we got back to the apartment, I did it because I realized that no one in my group was, vomiting or dying or passed out. And so I literally let other people test the drugs for me before I did it myself. And that's the type of shit that runs through my head when I smoke something or take something, drink something that's not regulated, is that I wonder what the fuck is in this. And our country would be much safer, much less anxious if we could go into a place that was properly regulated and we can have an honest conversation, much like taking another drug, like an antidepressant. Imagine if you could walk into a store full of hard drugs and have a conversation with someone who specializes in the drug and pairing people with what they need, what they want, giving you the good and bad information, even if you don't want to hear it. Their number one concern is providing value to the customer while also making a profit. Imagine if you could do that with things like heroin, cocaine, weed. We're starting to do it now. I don't think it would really increase the amount of people who would want it. The reason why I don't do heroin is not because it's not legal. I could have it within the day in a place like New York City or really anywhere. If I really wanted to do heroin, I could do it by the end of today. What pops into my head when I buy drugs is not the legality concerns. It is the concern of what it will do to me. Will I like it too much? I know people who have done heroin and have overdosed and died, and it started with painkillers when they were prescribed, Vicodin or Oxycontin as an athlete back in college. I know people who have had very bad experiences with heroin, and that is the reason why I don't do it. And I would not do it if it became legal, or at least I think I don't. But I don't think the reason why most people choose not to do drugs is because it's illegal. If you legalized hard drugs, if you legalize all drugs, I don't think it would change the customer base all that much. I think the people who are going to do cocaine, and I think the people who are going to do heroin. I think the people who are going to drink. People who are going to do weed, smoke weed. I don't really think you're making a pathway to drugs more than there already is. And it would be safer. We would have less dead people if hard drugs were regulated, and the government would make money. We would be safer as customers. Things might turn ugly with the cartels if their supply got cut off. But I don't know. That's a whole nother issue. But if we keep this illegal drug trade going, we can take the power out of the cartels by legalizing these harder drugs. The further we push hard drugs underground, the more power we give cartels and the more power we give to the black market, and the less safe it becomes, because no one is looking over the shoulder of someone who's fucking making crack cocaine in Tijuana. So I feel for this mother. I feel for people who have lost loved ones from fentanyl or any drug overdose. And I really do think the world would be a safer place if we decided to legalize the harder drugs. And I'm open to push back on that. I would love to hear people's opinions. If you send me a DM, reach out to me on social media, tell me what you think. So the last thing I want to get into, and I know I said we would do this thing about a history teacher being kicked out for going on a Trump rant. There's only a few minutes left in the episode, so I'll save that for a later episode. What I want to get into right now is this Joe Rogan SNL sketch. This sketch on SNL that included Joe Rogan and depicted Joe Rogan. And I want to give my thoughts on it. But first, let's watch the actual portion with Joe Rogan. I won't search the whole sketch. I believe the whole sketch was involved Ted Cruz. If you search SNL Joe Rogan sketch, it's going to come out. And for reference, if you're listening to this, it's the middle of November 2021. So go back and search like November SNL sketch Joe Rogan. If you're listening to this much later, and I'm sure it will pop up. And here it is. So I'm just going to throw it up there. I haven't watched anyone else's take on this. I wanted to watch this fresh. And so this is the clip. I'm going to make this go live with Joe Rogan being depicted by Pete Davidson in an SNL sketch. One sec. Let me put my headphones in. I'm going to switch out because this is connected to my computer. So let me start this over. This is Pete Davidson playing Joe Rogan.
Well, that's right. I used to host Fear Factor, and now doctors fear me.
Can you help me, Joe?
Oh, sure thing, Big Bird. You see, I took Carlos Mencia down. I could take COVID. Here's some zinc, an ayahuasca, and some horse medicine.
Well, why would a bird take horse medicine?
I'm a human, and I took horse medicine. And I'm...
Okay. So, first thing that I want to say about this sketch is the mention of Joe Rogan taking horse medicine to treat COVID, or to treat his COVID. Ivermectin is the name of the medicine, and it's given to humans. I believe over 1 billion doses have been given out to humans of ivermectin. The person who discovered the drug ivermectin was given the Nobel Prize. Let me just confirm that. Ivermectin Nobel Prize. Yeah, Nobel Prize for ivermectin intended for treatment of parasitic infection does improve its efficacy on COVID-19. So it did win the Nobel Prize. As of September 9th, 2021, its efficacy has been not proven to treat COVID-19, but people have been treating COVID with ivermectin. They've been treating themselves with it. People have reported seeing some success. There have been people that have reported it's done nothing, but I'm not qualified to talk about that. All I know is that there are a lot of people who are taking ivermectin to treat COVID. That is a fact. And so SNL and other media sources have called, or rather accused Joe Rogan of taking horse medicine, which, sure, some medications for humans are also given to animals. That is something that happens. Like when my dad takes Xanax, I don't ask my dad, why are you taking dog medicine? Like dogs take Xanax. That's like a common thing that you give to animals, is that you can give dogs Xanax to calm them down. Cats drink milk. I don't ask my mom why she's drinking cat juice when she's drinking a glass of milk. That would be ridiculous. So I think it's weird and misleading, honestly, when people accuse, in this case, Joe Rogan, of taking horse medicine, taking ivermectin, because you're purposely skewing people's views of a drug that SNL knows there have been 1 billion doses given out to humans. SNL knows that they're not stupid. They know that this medication has been given out billions of times, literally billions of times, to people, to human beings. And so calling it a horse medicine, calling it by something for its animal use. You're trying to paint a picture of the person who's taking it as an absurd person, as a crazy person, as an uninformed person, someone who just walks up to the vet and says, "Hey, can you give me some of that shit that you give to the horses?" Like, why the fuck would someone do that? And I don't know. It's just weird to me. It's weird. The whole thing with the horse medicine. And again, it doesn't even make me angry. It's just like the deliberate misleading of what people are taking for COVID, whether or not it's had success. And again, I just pulled up a fact check from Reuters for ivermectin. The 2015 Nobel Prize for ivermectin, intended for treatment of parasitic infections, doesn't prove its efficacy on COVID-19. Again, so the jury's still out on whether this will be an effective treatment or not. But these sources that keep painting it as a horse dewormer or horse medicine only, why don't you come out and talk about the efficacy of ivermectin or talk about it as a human medication? Because that would actually give people more information. If you were able to come out and speak from a place of, some intelligence on ivermectin being given to humans to treat COVID, that would be a much more interesting conversation than attempting to dismiss it as horse medicine and dismissing anyone else who takes it as kind of this below subpar level of intelligence person, like who kind of painting it as who the fuck would ever take this dumbass horse medicine. Well, I don't know. Maybe the billion people that have already taken it, and maybe the person who won the Nobel Prize. I don't know. It's stupid to me. So let's watch the rest of the scene from SNL, or the rest of the sketch from SNL.
Speaking of things that are horse-like, today's two sponsors are the letters S and D, as in I can S my own D.
So yeah, that may have played a little bit, it may have been buffering a little bit because I'm playing it through Riverside, through the application to record this podcast, but hopefully you heard the part of the sketch at least. And again, that is part of a sketch that is not the full sketch. That's just Pete Davidson, the part where he's playing Joe Rogan. Full disclosure, I enjoy Joe Rogan. I like listening to him a lot. This is not about me being a fan of his podcast. Another thing that's interesting to me from this sketch is that sources, mainstream sources like SNL or CNN, usually on the left, pretend that Joe Rogan doesn't exist. Even though Joe Rogan has more of a fan base and more of a listener base than most of these platforms, they essentially pretend like he doesn't exist. They just ignore the conversation. And it's interesting because sometimes I look when a notable doctor or scientist or anyone really, journalist, that's covering something that the whole world is dealing with right now, and I'll look at mainstream sources just to see, has anyone covered this conversation with this notable person that is relevant to every single person on the planet right now. And many times these quote-unquote mainstream media platforms don't cover Joe Rogan at all, even though he curates conversations that are with some of the most fascinating people in the world. And so I don't know whether CNN or SNL, I don't know whether they're scared of fading into the ether of inexistence, and it's why they're kind of clawing at someone who's bigger than them. I don't know if it's kind of like the Trump effect, where when people run out of content, they just talk about Trump, whether you're anti or pro-Trump. Just putting Trump in the title of a headline will give you more clicks regardless. So maybe they've been seeing Joe Rogan be successful for so long that it's almost this Trumpian reaction where you just want to put him in a sketch to get more people to click on it, because whether you like or you don't like Joe Rogan, you'd probably be interested in seeing a sketch on him. And people did watch this sketch. A lot of people watched this sketch, and even though it got thousands of thumbs down, it did not have a good thumbs up to thumbs down ratio. People are still talking about this sketch, and they're talking about SNL, which has largely become irrelevant. And I say that as a huge fan of Pete Davidson. I doubt he wrote this sketch. I'm guessing he was given lines and put in a costume and didn't really have any ownership over how this sketch came out. I don't know. Maybe he wrote it. Maybe he didn't. I'm a fan of Pete Davidson and a lot of the work that he does. I do think he's a really funny guy. I was just watching him on the Comedy Central roast of Justin Bieber yesterday. And he's fucking hilarious in that setting. But this I did not find funny or even entertaining at all. There are times where I watch sketches and it's not funny, but it's still entertaining in some way. I didn't really find the sketch entertaining at all. So I do think you can learn something from SNL going after Joe Rogan in this clip, because they have finally acknowledged his existence. SNL has finally taken a step down from pretending that they are the biggest sketch and biggest comedy content platform in the world, which they are far, 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 far from. There are small to mid-tier YouTubers that consistently pull in more viewership than SNL. They have taken a step down from their own pedestal, and they have at least acknowledged the existence of Joe Rogan, who is a media fucking giant. And it's weird. SNL must not want to grow because they are not taking hints from the general public about how bad their sketches have become and how great other content creators have dusted SNL and kind of made SNL its bitch. If you were really interested in growing your platform and growing your channel, you would pay attention to the other content creators that are doing creative things and are growing their platform and have millions and millions and billions of people listening, billions of downloads like Joe Rogan. Not to say copy Joe Rogan, but at least pay attention and learn from what he's doing and take hints from what other people like. Instead, SNL and many other mainstream media platforms live in this bubble where they all pretend that they're just like they were in the 1980s when there were much fewer channels. There was no YouTube. You were forced to watch. All of these outlets pretend like they're the only game in town, even when YouTube has come along, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram has come along and given everyone their own independent channel. And what's happened is that these independent creators have come and given a more entertaining form of content that blows SNL out of the water, because they don't live in this fucking like politically cancel culture minded ethos of this is what we're allowed to put out, this is what we're not allowed to put out. And SNL handcuffs themselves by living in that world. There are so many ways. I think Tim Dillon tweeted something like, there are 1,000 ways this sketch could have been funny. I would love to have seen Joe Rogan been made fun of genuinely and humorously, because there's so many things to make fun of about the guy. He talks about elk, DMT, aliens, and there's kind of that stereotypical view of him in mainstream media. And he is also a guy that enjoys laughing at himself. I saw him roasted on Tony Hinchcliffe's show Kill Tony, where I forget the name of the comic. I think it might have been Jeremiah Watkins, but he came out dressed as Joe Rogan, tatted up on the arms, had a bald cap, and Joe Rogan was laughing his ass off because this guy was just fucking taking the wind out of him by making fun of him. And that genuinely made me laugh, because he was kind of playing on all the tropes of Joe Rogan, and the silliness that goes on the show. But this was kind of just like, we're not making fun of Joe Rogan. We're making fun of the idea that anyone would take Joe Rogan seriously and that anyone would actually listen to Joe Rogan or that anyone would actually pay attention to him. And it's like they're kind of putting him, instead of actually looking at the content that he makes on a broader scope, they're going in from a very thin slice of ivermectin horse medicine and using that to paint a picture of Joe Rogan's entirety. And and that is a tool that you use in comedy. You take a very small slice of someone and you make that into a generalization and you make fun of them with a joke or sketch, and that's very funny. But SNL is not doing this from a place of fun. They're not doing this from a place of good intentions. You can tell that there's a bitterness and there's a darkness, and I feel bad for a lot of the cast because they are in this kind of like force-fed non-comedic engine that is supposed to be the Western pillar of comedy, and they're only allowed to talk about certain shit. And I don't know whether it comes from the top or they put handcuffs on themselves, but it's like you have all these people that I think are truly funny, and I've seen hilarious fucking sketches in the past, and some of them still make me laugh, but I've seen these people at the height of their funniness, and it makes me sad that this garbage is the result of dozens of writers and great comedic minds coming together and producing this shit. Because if there wasn't this unwritten rule of not being able to make fun of the people that you shouldn't make fun of and only making fun of the things or the people that you should make fun of, this show would be fucking amazing. I think this cast has the potential to make one of the funniest shows out right now, but they shoot themselves in the fucking foot by giving into this kind of bullshit political narrative, and instead of trying to be funny, they try to be a political force and view it as their job to tell people how to think. That is anti-comedy. When you try to be moralistic and tell someone how to think and say this is how you should live your life and anything else is just stupid, that is the opposite of comedy. Comedy is making fun of shit and making fun of yourself and bringing people together, and they're trying to gain this audience that isn't interested in being gained through these sketches that suck. And so that is enough negative energy. Again, I enjoy Pete Davidson. He happened to be the one playing Joe Rogan in the sketch. Did not think the sketch was funny at all. I think it was lazy. That's probably the part that bothers me the most. It's like if you Wikipedia Joe Rogan, they just did the three things that come up about him. The baldness, the elk, and the horse dewormer. I don't know. And I mean, you could have made those three things funny. You could have made that funny. But the thing, because again, on Kill Tony, Jeremiah Watkins did the same thing. He came out bald. He came out with the elk in the bag. He had the tattoos, had the bald head. So they did similar things on Kill Tony to make fun of Joe Rogan as they did on SNL. I think the difference was that in Kill Tony, it's clearly coming from like this genuine, loving place of tearing someone apart. You can tear someone apart comedically in a loving way. With this, it's like SNL. You can almost sense the jealousy of SNL in this sketch and the bitterness of SNL in this sketch. And that is the beauty of comedy, is that you can be lovingly bitter. You can be bitter towards someone in a loving way, and it shines through if you're coming from a good place. But this is just, it's the opposite of that. It's telling you how to live. It's telling you what morals you should have. And that is this week's episode. And so thank you again for tuning in. I really appreciate you checking out the show. If you would like bonus episodes, not only solo bonus episodes, but also bonus deep dive conversational episodes where I talk with my brother, my friends, and others about things like the COVID lab leak hypothesis. We did an episode on Bruce Lee. We just released one on ayahuasca. We did one on the obesity epidemic. We have one on the Dark Knight coming up. You can go to AUXORO. The burp's not in the link. You can burp while you type in the link, but it's auxoro.supercast.com. Go to auxoro.supercast.com, and that is where you can sign up for AUXORO Premium, where you get bonus episodes every month for less than $5. 3+ hours of premium content found nowhere else but AUXORO Premium. Again, that's auxoro.supercast.com. Thank you for listening. I love you. I'll talk to you next time.